This is Dr. Richard Abbey. Excuse me. Dr. Richard Abbey from Palo Alto, California. I am here at Abbey Neuropsychology Clinic. And today I'm going to talk to you and answer any of your questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. I can see any and all comments that you have. Let me adjust my mic here a little bit so you can hear me better. All right, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to turn this up. So what's the difference between a comprehensive neuropsychological assessment and a school assessment? So if you have a child that you're concerned about and you're not sure what to do, you may have went to your pediatrician or the school to ask them what is the best recourse, and what should you be doing here? And so those answers are really individualized, and it really depends on the situation. Now, schools generally will have a model called response to intervention. So what they're trying to do is provide the most amount of help to the most amount of children in the school. And the way that they can do that is to try some interventions to see if they can help catch up. So writing or math, then is to provide some assistance from the teacher or from the learning specialist. Maybe it's ramped up to being pulled out a little bit to get some help, or the learning specialist comes into the classroom. And this strategy is to get them to what the average student can do in the class. And so that's a good model to help most children throughout the United States and our communities. But what that model lacks a little bit is knowing what your child is capable of. And really, there's only one way to do that. You assess them to see not just what their math and reading and writing skills are, but what are their ability levels. And so really, from a cognitive functioning standpoint, that means what is their innate ability to process information. So it could be verbal information. Some kids are much better at verbal information, answering questions and reasoning questions. Some kids are less verbal, and they're much better with pictures, right, or visual stimuli, putting blocks together and figuring out patterns and designs. And both of these abilities are equally important, and they can really tell us a lot about the intellectual abilities of a child. And so now, when they're not similar, so when they're very dissimilar, so one is way higher than the other one, that should cause us to think about, well, why is that? Because the assumption, and when people are functioning at their maximum capacity, those things are even, and one is lower than the other one. There may be some opportunities there. So that's not something that is going to be caught in a response intervention model. But even further, when you're looking at other processing, like working memory, for example, which is another component that's very important in looking at cognitive functioning, the ability to hold on to information and mentally manipulate it. Why is that important? When you read, you have to keep track of what you're reading. You have to keep information in mind. You have to then encode it for memory or use it for inferences, for logical reasoning, comprehend what you read, put things and complex concepts together. So it could be that you are reading for mathematics or a novel or information that you're trying to glean for science. So all these things are really important. And if you have limited working memory, it's really hard to put all the complex information together. Processing speed is another really important aspect of intellectual functioning, where if that's slow, that can really make processing math or reading or writing arduous and very difficult, and slower than your own natural ability. So if you have intellectual function up here and processing speed down here, that's not going to feel good. It's going to, you're going to struggle, and you're going to struggle relative to yourself. So really, when the deeper you go into an assessment, the more you're going to learn about your child. The earlier that you do this, the better they're going to respond to interventions. So, for example, if you have a 6-year-old or 8-year-old and you discover some of these things that could be opportunities for them, and you help build their brain so they can overcome those things, they're going to do much better because they haven't missed the information, or they're not falling behind in reading or writing or math. It could be socialization and things. So the other thing when you start looking into neuropsychological testing is when you're struggling in certain areas, whether that be social functioning or emotional functioning or different aspects of learning, reading, writing, math. You want to look deeper in to see why that's happening. And so in a school assessment, for reading, they may have you read a list of words. And while that can capture somebody who is really having significant difficulties, you're going to miss the person who actually can read the list of words, but where they're struggling is reading paragraphs of information, and then they have to show that they comprehended that information. So they have to respond and answer questions and differentiate between all the details, and that can be really difficult. So one of the things we see when we're looking deeper into the process with somebody having difficulties with reading is you might have seen this in your child, they start to like substitute words. So you might see somebody, they say on instead of in. They're kind of mixing up the pronouns, or they read a word that's not even on the page. They substituted it for a word that actually has similar meaning, but it's not the same word. And so when you start to see these errors, we need to look in that more deeply. And so when you get into the reading and the neuropsychological aspects of reading, it's more than just like visual information. So your eyes bring into that information into the visual cortex, and then it's processed in the brain into the word form area. And so what we see in children who are having difficulties with reading, and it looks like they just sounded this word out like a page ago or yesterday, and you thought they had it and then lost it. Usually what they're doing is really overrelying on the memory network instead of this junction in the parietal kind of temporal area, the word form area, where you're supposed to be developing really good representations of these words. And that could break down with the auditory, because it's sound symbol relationship. So maybe you're not getting all the auditory information in. So you have an auditory processing difficulty. You could have visual processing difficulty. You could have difficulty with putting these words into the word form areas, so you're using your memory system instead. And so that's very inefficient, because when it's in the word form area, you automatically retrieve that word every time you see it, once it's in there. Like if you see the word cat, and you're like, I don't know what that means, or how that cat, ooh, cat. I got it now, right? So that's in the word form area. But if you memorized it, is in a different area. You processed it through the hippocampus, and you may or may not remember that later. So when somebody's a real good reader and they're putting all these words in the word form area, there's a lot of what we call automaticity. You don't even think. You don't. Once you got it, you don't sound out cat again. You don't sound out these words. It's just automatic. So you don't even have to think about it. When you're having difficulties with sounding out words, excuse me. So if you're having difficulty sounding out words and putting them into the word form area, and reading is difficult, here's where that working memory takes place. So now you're exhausting your attentional resources, you're exhausting your working memory, because you're working so hard with reading. So now reading, it's really hard, and it's really hard to comprehend what you're reading because you don't have a lot of attentional and working memory resources left. So you get to the end, even though it might seem like, well, you're a little bit slower, you're taking your time, you're getting it done. You're not comprehending all the details. You might have a big picture of what you read, but what are the details? And bigger than that, not just what are the concrete details, but what are the, how are you putting all the information together? Abstract reasoning, like what would happen next in the story? What was the overall meaning in the story? What was the theme of the story? Those are the bigger things that children having difficulties with reading have difficulties with. And you see, differences with people who have an attention problem. So this is more in the frontal, the prefrontal cortex and the connections in there. Generally, when we test this in neuropsychological assessment, a child could still have trouble reading, but now they have difficulties for a different reason. Maybe they skipped a line. They skipped a word. They were reading and they didn't even pay attention to like the whole page they just read. Who hasn't done that, right? But if you do that often, and it's really getting in your way, that's when you start to kind of get in this category of qualifying for a diagnosis, because your attention is really getting in the way of doing the task that you want to do, which in this case is reading. And bigger than that, a lot of people don't talk about the executive functions that are associated with ADHD. So yeah, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. A lot of people don't realize you don't have to have the H. You can just be inattentive. And if you're inattentive, and maybe it's not, it's really confusing for people too, because they're like, no, my kid can watch video games all day long. They have no problem sustaining their attention. But what we're talking about is really attentional control. So attentional control is your ability to focus when you need to focus on something that might not be intrinsically interesting. Maybe that's like your math homework, or maybe that's like your history. Maybe that's listening to your history teacher that's maybe not the most fascinating person, or maybe you aren't so interested in that information. But most people can pay attention anyway, and they can get the information, they can push themselves through it. And so it's really more about how can you focus and control your attention, not just on video games, but on things that are so interesting. So like if homework, 10 minutes of homework is procrastinated, and it takes, instead of 15 minutes, it takes 45 or 30 minutes, or there's just a fight to get it going. And, it would have been easier just to do it right after school. But no, it's either not done or waited till the last second, or is crumbled up in their book bag and they're doing it the morning before, or, they did it. It ended up in their book bag, but somehow it didn't end up in the, being turned into the teacher. So there's all these missing assignments, or even within an assignment, it could be like, oh, well, you missed the plus sign. It was a negative sign. You missed the details, and so you got it wrong, not because you don't know how to do the operations of mathematics, but because you weren't paying attention to the details. And, you weren't able to really control your attention when you needed to, and at an age-appropriate level. And so when you kind of dig into these processes a little bit deeper, where is that? Is that with attentional switching? Is that divided attention? Is that sustained attention over time for things that aren't intrinsically interesting? Is that a combination of holding on to information in mind, working memory, and sustaining your attention at the same time? Like there's a lot of like brain power to process, complex mathematical operations, or really detailed or abstract reading information. Where's the breakdown there? And if you're a parent, you're helping your child break things down to their component parts and their steps constantly. That's a part of executive functioning. Planning to do your homework on time, being organized. Like how does their room look? How does their book bag look? What is their ability to kind of keep track of all their things and their assignments? Are they showing up to their baseball game and they forgot their cleats or their baseball or something? And people do that, but is this a pattern? And so why would you even want to look into this in the first place? It's like, they'll get by, maybe I have that, or his mom had that or his brother had. They did fine, or I did fine. Well, maybe, maybe you have a little more intellectual horsepower than your child does, or maybe you grew up 30 years ago when school was a little bit not as demanding as it is today. But also the big factor is, unlike 30, 40, 50 years ago, you can actually do something about it. So you don't have to struggle with these things like dyslexia or ADHD or social communication, right? You can, is my child just shy? Why don't they have friends? And, what's going on there? Is it social communication difficulty? Is it autism? Is it just shyness? Are they just having difficulties expressing themselves? There's all these things going on in their head. They want friends. They don't know how to make them. What's going on? And so you can look into those things, because all these things take their emotional toll on our children. And it can be really difficult if we don't address these things. They can struggle, and emotionally they start to develop low self-esteem, and we don't want that for our children. We want them to be happy. Of course, they're going to have life challenges, and there's all these different things that they're going to have to overcome, but we want them to face those challenges straight on and be successful and actually do really well. And so how do you do that? Well, it's really funny. So, the mind has created things like putting 900,000 pounds of metal in the sky, and we're going to fly all around the earth. We have camera equipment, computer equipment, the internet. We're about ready to put men back on the moon. Soon enough, we're going to be on Mars, and we're flying all these spaceships around and electric cars. Like, can we actually, instead of making all these different devices and creating a world that has these conveniences and all these amazing things, is it possible to actually improve things like attentional control, or divided attention, or planning, organization, executive function? Is it possible to become a better reader? Is it possible actually look inside the brain, see how it's functioning, and strengthen that? And the answer to that is yes. And so really the punchline, why you would want to be seen by a neuropsychologist who not only knows how to look in depth at in the breadth of your child's functioning. The goal shouldn't be a diagnosis. The goal, in my opinion, right? I mean, a diagnosis got us so far in the last several decades of, okay, well, you get some extra time at school, maybe get some pull-out services at learning center or whatever. You should be able to go beyond that with modern technology. If we have all these things, could we actually look for healing opportunities? Could we help the child heal themselves and strengthen their brain so they could focus and pay attention and be successful, and these things wouldn't get in their way anymore? Absolutely, we do that all the time. So the advantage of doing a neuropsychological assessment is to have knowledge about how your child is using their brain. And if we just look at really what's going on there, and if something is lagging behind, like their reading, and you look in depth as to why that is, and there could be, wow, they're having difficulties with visual processing, like both eyes aren't teaming up very well, and it's making it very difficult. And I'm not just talking about 20/20 vision. I'm talking about using both eyes to team up together to actually read the material. But once it's in the visual cortex, what happens next? Is it going in the word form area? Is it going into the memory centers? Are they using the brain in the most efficient way? And then it's got to go up to the frontal lobes for further processing. And if we have, maybe dyslexia, or maybe we have dyslexia and ADHD, or maybe we don't have the reading difficulties, but it comes to the frontal lobes of the higher order processing, and we have a real difficult time with making inferences and abstract reasoning. Those things can be overcome by strengthening the brain and having a program for that through neuroplasticity. So you can actually put more power and energy into the neurons by doing very, like the equivalent of 3,000 brain push-ups in a half an hour. You can do that with modern technology. And you can strengthen the neural connections in the brain. We talked about the visual cortex. Really, there's this whole pathway, usually in the left hemisphere, called the arcuate fasciculus. It's very important in the reading pathways. It goes through the temporal lobe, it goes through the word form area all the way up to the frontal lobe. And so is that affected? Because if it is, you can overcome that and strengthen that, then when you go to read, you're on an even playing field. And so can you actually read to your true ability? Reading is super important. So all these things can be improved. If you have questions, by the way, as I kind of walk through this, let me know, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to answer any of your questions. Now, here's the big thing. Now, if you've been kind of putting it off, I'll do this over the summer next year. Huge opportunity in the summertime to actually, you could make some big differences in your child over the next 2 to 3 months while you're getting ready for the fall to make a big difference to have a more successful year. So if the pattern is, we start out pretty good in the fall and then we start struggling and, so goes the rest of the year, this could be an opportunity to really stop that cycle, that repeated cycle, and get them while they're young, because as they grow older into their teen years, not only do they get busier, but they tend to form a self-image, and it could be like, just not good at. You can fill in the blank. It could be, I'm just not good at, the whole academic thing, or I'm not good at math, or I'm not good at reading, whatever it is. I'm not good at making friends. And they start to give up on themselves. So if you can get them early, and you can strengthen their brain, and you can help them overcome this sooner than later, then they don't have those false beliefs about themselves that they're not good at this, they can't do math, reading, writing, they can't make friends or be successful in those arenas. They actually can be. Or neuroplasticity you have doesn't mean that as a teenager and even as an adult. We see plenty of adults and teenagers, but the person has to be willing. You can't just show up like in a gym and have somebody else lift the weights for you, right? You can show up and the games are fun and do these things and strengthen your brain. So if you have any questions, give us a call. The phone number is below, 650-614-0014. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have, not only with the neuropsychological assessment, the differences between that and the school assessment, but what is possible. A lot of the clients that we work with want to know what's possible beyond medication, because they want more of a holistic approach. They want one where we're unlocking their child's true potential, and not just using external things to help them get better. Certainly there's a place for that. If we have SATs coming up in the next few months, we need more time than that to really make a huge difference. So it can also be a combination of doing a medication, and eventually the majority of our clients titrate completely off any medication if they were taking some when we started working with them. So anyway, I just want to put that out there. If you're wondering what a neuropsychological assessment is, how it's different from the school, how it can benefit your child really by having this knowledge and developing a healing plan, developing a plan to help them actually get better, to identify those areas that are lagging behind, right? I mean, that's all it is. And to have a plan to catch those areas up, the ones that are lagging behind, catch those areas up to the ones that are already optimized. Then the magic happens, because they don't procrastinate anymore. They start to read fluently. They start to love to learn. They start to, make friendships. And if you have a child that is at home and they're not having a lot of friends, and they're starting to do this thing, okay, Mom, I'll be with you in a minute. All right, Dad, just a second, because they're dealing with their friends. You're like, secretly inside them, I'd be like, yes. I'd be like, okay, you got to put the phone down and go to bed. But those are awesome things. Those are the things we want for our kids, to really be happy and successful, to have meaningful relationships. Give us a call if you have any more questions, 650-614-0014.